How's it going, everybody? It is, we'll say 10:50 conservatively on Wednesday morning. I'm used to saying evening or afternoon. This is throwing me off my groove, man. But it is Wednesday morning, November 27th, 2019. And it is time for an overdue episode of Riding in Cars with Cards. This is the show where we're talking about cards, decks, strategies, formats, snapshots in time, applying the lessons that we're trying to learn from Homeward Path. So, for those of you who don't know, who didn't pay attention to the content that I've been putting out and the content that everyone on Constructive Criticism has been putting out, we had a Discord open last weekend, and we ended up with, I think, 27 players playing. And it was an all-arena standard tournament. We played 5 rounds of Swiss, cut to top 8, and if you made top 8, you got store credit from Oasis Games, culminating with the winner getting a pretty sizable chunk. And it was a unique experience, to say the least. I've never played a Magic tournament online before. Magic Online leagues or Magic Online 8-mans notwithstanding. It was a unique experience to play regular Swiss rounds and chat it up in the Discord in between rounds. Like, it's nothing I've ever done. I've never done anything like this before. It's a brand new experience for me. So, getting to play from the comfort of my own home, getting to play on a computer, not having to, worry about how well randomized my deck is, not having millions of distractions, not having, frankly, crippling social anxiety, being around lots and lots of other people at once. It was a new experience for me, and it's one I could get used to. I still prefer doing it in person, even with the aforementioned anxiety, because once I get through that, I love interacting with other Magic players. It's my favorite thing about the game, and it's the thing I love to do the most. That's why we do this, right? But the event itself was, I would argue, fairly successful, considering it was not very, it was announced with plenty of lead time, but still, it's a Discord server event. The turnout for the first one's not going to be spectacular, but 27 players for the first one on a Saturday morning when nothing else, or when, a bunch of other stuff is going on, like, that's fine. That seems good. There's plenty of other things we could be doing with that time. There were football games on. There were, commitments to family. There was commitments to other things. And the reason we got out of commitment to family, for those of you who don't know, the eventual second place finisher, Andrew Elliott, actually came over to the house and loaned me a machine to use because mine is still in repair. And I was not confident that my little HP Stream 4 gig RAM laptop was going to run Arena consistently well enough to not lose me matches due to disconnection issues or computer crashes. So his wife was kind enough to loan me her laptop and then go with my wife and all 3 of my children to a fairly nearby children's attraction so that Andrew and I could play in relative peace in the house. And so all of the setup, all of the build up out of the way, let's talk about how the tournament itself went, because that's why you're all here. And I know it, and that's okay. So in the lead up to the tournament, I was trying really hard over the last week or so before to determine what deck I wanted to play. I had a handful available to me. The downside is none of them were doing the most powerful things in the format. Like, I had a version of Green Black Adventures, but I was pretty well out of Mythic Rare Wild cards to be able to get the cards I would need to finish it out. I needed to be able to get the rest of my questing beasts, and I needed sideboard cards. So I opted against that because even though I would be playing one of the more powerful engine cards, I didn't have the framework around it that I wanted. Similar situation for Gruul Adventures. The decks I did have that I was confident in, I had Temur Reclamation, most notably Autumn Burchett's List, from the Mythic Championship, which I liked a lot, but felt outdated, and I did not feel comfortable trying to innovate within that framework with short notice and having to figure out how to beat all these aggro decks and card advantage oriented creature decks that had popped up. Most importantly, Autumn's build was seemingly designed to go over the top of the Oko decks and fight on that axis, be able to fight on the axis of trying to go over the top of a mid-range deck that invalidated aggro, and as such just did not possess a very good aggro matchup. The only main deck removal spells were 2 Flame Sweeps, and we were trying to rely on main deck Flame Sweep and Mystical Dispute to be able to beat all these like Questing Beast, Bone Crusher Giant decks, and that's not a great place to be. It's just not. The other thing that concerned me was a resurgence in Teferi Time Raveler thanks to the Jeskai Fires deck and the blue-white control deck. So I ultimately decided I didn't want to be on a plan where I was going to be trying to cast a giant instant at the end of my turn. That led me to pick up my old baby, Blue-Black Terramander, and I ran several ranked matches with it, finishing, I think, 2-7 over the span of 9 matches, and I ran into every creature deck imaginable, and this was my deck designed to beat up on creatures, and I went 2-7. Now, the 2 wins were resounding and convincing victories, but there were some deck construction errors that popped up, and the biggest thing holding me back is I couldn't figure out how I wanted to sideboard with the deck. Because there's the option to go leaner against decks that are going to try to go bigger to compete with your powerful spells, like Enter the God Eternals, and try to, mess with your removal by playing a different and more wide array spread of creatures. You could go a little bit bigger than that in order to keep pace, play some bigger creatures, and make cards like Enter the God Eternals worse. At which point it's a little bit better for me to be able to sideboard down on the mana curve and be able to take advantage of their mana inefficiency. But then there's also the possibility that my opponents take that approach and go way under and make me have exactly the right removal at every stage of the game. And if I sideboard into a smaller configuration, I'm not going to be able to keep up. So it was a case of I couldn't figure out what the right 75 was, much less what my plan would be in given matchups based on how it had been playing. I just had not been having success, and I was still unable to nail down the exact reason why. So I put it aside, and I played the last deck I had left, which was Izzet Draw 2. Is it good? It's okay. It's fun. It does a select couple of powerful things. Notably, one decision I made that ended up feeling really good is cutting down on Ironcrag Pyromancer in the main deck, because as powerful a card as it is very slow. I.e., in a format where players are playing more cards that are good against it, removal spells, creatures that don't die to being dealt 3 damage, and creatures that make it difficult to block with a 0/4, and have it live so you can keep generating value. And the fact that a lot of the times, even though its printed mana cost is 3, in the face of a lot more removal, in the face of a lot more opponents being able to swing in, create a situation where you block in order to preserve your life total, and then they burn the creature away, it was functionally a 4-drop more often than not, and we were already a little clogged at that slot between Crackling Drake and some of our card draw. Chemist's Insight, the ability to double spell, leaving up, burn spells, and Thrill of Possibility, that kind of thing. So I leaned more heavily into the card that I feel is the most busted within that shell, which is Improbable Alliance. And Improbable Alliance is a very good Magic card. The other conscious decision I made is, thanks to playing Thrill of Possibility, Chemist's Insight, Royal Scions, Opt, Radical Idea, Beacon Bolt, ways to get cards out of my hand that are not good. a la, similar in theory to Faithless Looting in Modern before it got banned. The idea that we can play some cards that are maybe a little bit more questionable, play more copies of cards that may end up being dead cards in some matchups, because we can discard them to card effects when they're bad. Or we can bottom them with Opt. The Improbable Alliance itself has the ability to loot cards away. We ultimately ended up playing all 4 copies of Lava Coil in the main, and I was very happy with it. We also ended up playing, I think, 2 or 3 copies of Scorching Dragonfire in the main, which I was also very happy with, because if an opponent, the hardest card for the deck to beat, bar none, is Narset Parter Veils, which literally turns off our whole deck. We can't draw more than 1 card a turn, so Improbable Alliance doesn't work, and our extra card draw, depending on what it is either dead or not as good, depending on what turn you're casting it on. And if you play Narset in conjunction with Teferi, it's even harder, because I can't cast Opt on your turn. I have to do it on mine, where it's a dead card now. Crackling Drake is a lot worse when it doesn't draw a card. All of this kind of snowballed together, and one of the reasons I decided to play Scorching Dragonfire is it's a nice, clean answer to both of those cards while still being a good creature removal spell in game 1. You can still kill a Bone Crusher Giant with it. You can still kill an Exile and Edgewall Innkeeper so they can't buy it back with Fine Finality. You can still snipe down an Arclight Phoenix if that's something you need to do. There's a litany of things that card hits that is very good. So I opted in favor of that. Again, also playing what is otherwise a removal spell in a format where sometimes opponents aren't going to be playing creatures is a little bit questionable, but we have a lot of ways to loot things away and make sure we don't draw, if we draw the wrong half of our deck, we can get through it, because we're just drawing so many cards over the course of a game. What did me in was the inability to kill large creatures. Lovestruck Beast in particular was very hard for this deck to beat, because I would have to 2-for-1 myself to kill it. So the card that ended up pulling the most weight, unsurprisingly, was Improbable Alliance, doing a very good job of creating a wall of blockers to hold a Lovestruck Beast at bay, and, chip back in the other way. Like, getting to activate that on both players' turns was a dream come true. As someone who's played with Bitter Blossom and Dreadhorde Invasion and numerous other cards of that ilk, this is probably one of the more interesting ones I've ever played with. You're talking to the guy who tried to make Goblin Assault work in Standard, because it was a slightly worse Bitter Blossom. Turns out 1 extra mana and forcing the creatures to attack each turn is pretty rough. Not a great place to be. So the upside of those creatures having flying, of being able to trigger it on both players' turns, and being able to use it to fuel itself later in the game, it all led to what felt like a pretty cohesive, pretty effective, pretty powerful deck, even if a lot of the individual cards are not very good. And that's the ultimate downfall of the deck. I didn't have enough ways to interact with larger creatures. I think we were playing 1+1 Beacon Bolt, 1 in the main, 1 in the sideboard. And then, I wasn't playing the Ironcrag Pyromancer. I was playing 2 in the main deck, and I boarded them out very frequently. In retrospect, the biggest thing I wish I had registered, I forgot. I can't even say I forgot. I made the conscious decision to cut Aethergust from the 75. And the cards that beat me, I went 2 and 3. I beat Rakdos Knights and Mono Red Aggro, and I lost to Green Black Adventure, Jeskai Fires, and Simic Ramp. And the cards that beat me in every single one of those rounds were red or green. So the ability to have tucked them back into the deck, given myself an extra turn to apply some pressure, would have been huge. And I feel that is the single largest mistake I made. The other one would have been Bone Crusher Giant in the sideboard, as an additional way to apply pressure when we sideboarded into what was essentially more of a flash deck. And that was the little wrinkle of technology that I went with. Opponents that loaded up on cards like Narset or Hand Disruption or, enchantment removal, whatever, would frequently get got by Brineborn Cutthroat into Brazen Borrower after sideboarding. I think Brazen Borrower probably needs to be in the main deck. It's just a really, really good Magic card. It does what this deck does really well, even if you don't play the Cutthroat in the main. But considering the sheer volume of card draw we're playing, the cheap interaction in the form of Shock and Scorching Dragonfire, cards like Thrill of Possibility and Chemister's Insight on our opponent's turn, sideboarding into more counter spells, probably need to start with the Cutthroat Borrower Improbable Alliance framework and build from there. Crackling Drake is really good, but it only dealt damage one game the entire day. We played 5 rounds of Swiss. I went 2 and 3. All but, let's see, both my wins were 2-0. One of my losses was 2-0. And then the other 2 losses went to 3 games, and we lost it narrowly at the end. One of them, I played to an out and didn't draw it. Notably, it was I needed to draw a land in order to cast the 2 spells in my hand that would catch me back up. I didn't draw the land. We died. The other one, against the Simic Ramp player, it was a whole different ballgame. The Simic Ramp player got me with turn 3 Nissas in first and third games. And without Aether Gust, I can't catch up. So there's a possibility down the line that it's a really good idea for me to rebuild the deck, either with a splash color to give me access to better removal, or just a different kind of focus in order to keep pace with these bigger, faster, more powerful decks. And that leads me to the biggest part of this tournament report, which is the metagame report. I played what I was comfortable with, I played what I had logged the most game time with, and I played the deck I was comfortable sideboarding with the most. I didn't play the best deck in the format. Andrew did. I think 2 other players in the top 8 did. They played Jeskai Fires of Invention. Now, there's 2 different ways to build that deck. You can do the Cavaliers version, which is faster and more explosive. I.e., you can go Fires of Invention into clear your board with Deafening Clarion. And then on turn 5, you can go Cavalier of Flame, Kenrith the Returned King, activate Cavalier, activate Kenrith, swing, deal a ton of damage. And it's going to be disgusting as long as it connects. And that's going to be the most consistent version. That's going to be the one that feels like the best deck in Standard. It feels like it's doing the most powerful thing. Cavalier of Flames Enter the Battlefield ability is also just fantastic with Fires of Invention because you can dump the cards that aren't good to find the cards that are, similar to what we were doing with all of our discard to draw and the jumpstart cards. Similar to what Faithless Looting does in Modern. I understand that is the best deck. I'm not going to fight over that. There's no arguing that. The difference between this and best decks in Standard in the last couple of years, this one feels beatable. It feels like something you can beat if you devote to it. And you don't even have to devote to it with the express intention of beating it and losing to everything else. If you can play a good interactive game and keep them a little bit behind, keep them from leveraging their advantages correctly, you can keep pace and you can turn the game the other way. As evidenced in the final, it's one of those decks that has to set up for a couple of turns and then everything starts snowballing. But if you can put a lot of pressure on them and make them take turns off during setup, you can tighten the screws and put them in a position where they have to play this thing and they're still dead. So instead of doing, here's the best aggro deck, here's the best mid-range deck, here's the best control deck, here's the best combo deck, I'm going to say the deck that does the most powerful thing is Jeskai Fires. Whether you're playing the Cavaliers version, as several were in the tournament, or you're playing the Planeswalker version that Andrew and my buddy Nick both champion pretty strongly, Sarkhan the Masterless is a very strong Magic card. Reminds me, it's, as Spencer put it in the initial card evaluation he did on it after War of the Spark released, it is much closer to Gideon Ally of Zendikar than anything we've gotten since Gideon Ally of Zendikar. In that, if it does nothing else, it comes down, makes a 4/4, and if your opponent kills Sarkhan, you still have a 4/4. But if your opponent doesn't kill the Planeswalker, he gets to join in the fun next turn, and you're swinging for 8, and you're turning the corner in a hurry. 8 in the air is a lot, and oh, by the way, there's more Planeswalkers in this deck. You can just get draws where Teferi Time Raveler bounces a thing and messes up your opponent's tempo. They don't have enough pressure to swing back because the format slowed a little bit. And then you go just Teferi into Narset into Sarkhan, swing for 12. Or swing for 8, I've got lethal on the board. So there's nothing that says you can't do that. One card I would like to see experimented with within this shell is Chandra Acolyte of Flame. Because of the ability to cast your Deafening Clarions or your removal spells or even your card selection spells in Andrew's case because he was playing Shimmer Possibility, the ability to cast those out of the graveyard with the Fires of Invention for free. So if your hand is a little light on action, you can start digging. Or you can just catch up on the board a little bit. You know, getting an extra usage, an extra round out of your utility spell seems like it could be interesting. I don't imagine I'd want to run more than one, but it's a card I'm intrigued by within the shell of the deck because I think it makes a lot of sense. It also plays very well with Sarkhan because you can zero the Chandra to put a counter on her and Sarkhan, and then Sarkhan can plus, and now Sarkhan's really hard to kill. So, and sometimes the Chandra Zero can give you an extra dragon, which in turn makes it even harder for opponents with a bunch of small creatures to attack in. Like, it just makes a ton of sense in my head. It may be 1,000% wrong. The best engine card in the format is Edgewall Innkeeper, and that's not particularly close. The Green X Adventures deck seems really, really, really good because it does a good job applying early aggressive pressure. Questing Beast is a heck of a Magic card to top your curve at. You can play Nissa after sideboard if you want to. You can, counter. You can get on the board, force your opponent to have a board wipe, and then rebuild from it because you're in green-black. You can get on the board and get really big on the board thanks to a card like Venerated Loxodon in the Selesnya build. Or you can leverage the best engine card with the best aggressive card in Embercleave by playing Gruul Adventures, which neatly transitions us into the best aggressive shell. I don't think you can go wrong playing Embercleave in Standard right now. If you want to be the one bringing the fight to your opponent, there's a lot worse ways to do it than playing Embercleave. I don't love Cavalcade of Calamity plus Torbran. I don't love trying to be Knights Tribal without access to Embercleave. There's a time and a place for trying to be a perfect curve-out aggro deck, and that time and place is not when you have a Temur Battle Rage in the format. You want to get big and you want your opponent to die. So those are my takeaways from the event. One, I played a bad deck. I'm not going to dispute that. I played what I played because of the fear, and I don't need to let that happen to me again. I need to do a better job identifying the deck that I'm most comfortable with, that I feel gives me the best chance to win regardless of how I think it lines up against the field. This one, I was playing to enjoy myself, playing to learn, playing to figure out what other people were on. I'm going to be coming to win the next time. I'm going to be coming in with a plan. I'm going to be coming in ready to go. I've got time. I'm going to get this thing together. And then the metagame has evolved in a pretty drastic way to where we've got a free spell deck that does the most powerful thing in the format by a substantial margin, and 2 aggressive engine decks that are really, really good at applying pressure. So that's my big takeaway from this tournament. So that's all I got for this. I hope I catch you at the next one. I will be sharing dates and everything when that's ready. Y'all take it easy. Got questions, comments, concerns, leave them down there. On Facebook, on Facebook, my name is Adam Spain. Join the Facebook group, The Homeward Pathfinders. On Twitter, I'm at HomewardPathMTG. Remember, if you're a patron, your deck list, if you send it to me, goes to the front of the line to get published on this show. And that'll wrap up what I got this week, everybody. Thanks again. Enjoy your holiday. Because if I have to talk about what I'm thankful for all of you that have been around, that have given me, somebody to talk to about all this weird nonsense rattling around in my head. So, thanks again. Take it easy. Stay safe. Enjoy your holiday. We'll catch you next week.